something amazing took place last year when Toyota decided to bring back the amazing and legendary Supra. And even though people might argue that the brand new Supra isn't quite a Toyota, it might not really matter at the end of the day. We got this car back, we got the nameplate back in business, and we are just as excited as before when Mark IV, Mark III, Mark II, and Mark Is were all introduced to the marketplace. So I've literally just picked up this evaluation unit. I'm going to do a thorough review and evaluation in a little while. But for now, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the 2021 Supra. Now, I happen to own a 2020 Supra, so we're going to do a comprehensive back-to-back comparison of the two units and see how much change they actually really made on the real road. On paper, there's lots of changes that were made, and we might assume that the 2021 is better in every aspect. That might not be true, so please come back to see the full evaluation and comparison with the 2020 model. For now, let me give you a quick rundown of what's happening with the 2021 model. As many of you might already know, Toyota made a whole bunch of refinements and upgrades for 2021. Not so much in terms of design or really major changes for that matter, but they refined a whole bunch of things, including suspension, the shocks, and the steering has all been recalibrated. But the big news, of course, is a huge bump in horsepower, as much as 47 more horsepower for 2021. And that increase of 47 horsepower translates to faster 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 times. Not a huge amount, but nevertheless, it is measurable, about 0.2 seconds or so faster to those numbers. But more importantly, have the changes that Toyota made to things like suspension, the actual steering input, and a whole bunch of minor refinements, do they actually add up to make a different feeling Supra? So that's what we're going to find out. What I can tell you though, for 2021, not only do they have the 3.0 as we did in 2020, but they've introduced a lower, more of an entry model in the form of a 2-liter 4-cylinder, also from BMW. So that's kind of exciting that Supra is more accessible with a lower entry point and a lower price point. But for now, I have the 3.0 Premium here in amazing red in a 2021 format. And let's see how this thing has actually performed inside and out. I'm an automotive engineer with 30 years of experience building, manufacturing, developing cars for a living. And I'm a professional evaluation engineer. So I'm here to evaluate everything from the exterior, body, fit and finish, to the design and performance, to the interior and everything else in between. So first of all, in terms of the basic fit and finish, I know people complain that, hey, this is not truly a Toyota car, it's built by BMW, so is it still just as well built? Well, I do own a 2020 Supra, and that has been completely reliable. And actually, most people don't know this is not built in BMW factory. It's built in Austria by a division or part of a Magna family of companies, and so it's actually not built in BMW factory either. But anyway, I can tell you right now by looking at the body fit and finish. So you look at this gap. I always look at the gap. Now it's got a kind of clamshell design on the hood, so you don't see the normal seam along here, but you see it on the side here instead. And you can tell if I run my finger through how tight and accurate and consistent this gap is. So even if you look at between the hood and the front door here, look at that. This is very, very consistent. There's no way people can argue that this is not as good as Toyota, because it is. Even if you look at the corner there, it's extremely well built in terms of the body fit and finish. So if you kind of lower your body and look along the side, you can also look at the paint quality, and it's actually first class. I don't see any paint defects because I'm able to detect things that most people might not. And here I am looking between the trunk and the rear quarter panel, and again, almost perfect fit. Now I will say there's a slight difference in height or level between here and here, but it's very marginal. I wouldn't call that a defect by any means. But looking through again, so carefully looking at all the different emblems and looking through the paint and the body fit, I will tell you this is solid A. So even this gas cap, you can look at this fit here. Sometimes they don't quite fit. Now you can see this one is slightly higher, like literally in a micro centimeter here, and so that's really quite negligible. But otherwise, the fit, the paint job, the overall build, it's actually first class. This is again the premium model 3.0, so the wheels are actually the same as well. And for 2021, as I mentioned, there is a more of a lower price point 2.0 version. And there's also a special edition called the A91, which has a blue paint, some special graphics, and some interior finishing that's not available in other models. But other than that, it's exactly identical to the 2020 model that was launched. And you know what? It still looks fantastic. I think when it first came out, people weren't sure if they like it because it's so different and there's so many curvature and so many intersecting lines that it looks kind of busy. But the Supra is one of those cars that you have to see in person to truly appreciate it, because when you see it actually on the road being driven by someone and it passes through in front of you, you realize this is a very special design. This is the car that gets everyone's attention. You could be driving a Porsche 911 or even a Ferrari, and you might not get as much attention as the Supra simply because this is really rare, unique, and actually quite beautiful. Let's take a look inside the Supra now to see how much I've changed or improved. And I can tell you right now, the inside of Supra is identical to 2020 model. They haven't made any changes inside. Of course, depending on which model you buy, the 2.0, the 3.0 Premium, or the A91 Special Edition, there's a slight difference in interior. But as far as this 3.0 Premium is concerned, there's absolutely no change from last year. And there's nothing wrong with that. The simplicity of this design is actually the beauty of this Supra. From engineering's perspective, they've done everything right. So there's an easy, very legible dial, digital dial of course in the front. All the controls are in the steering, and this is of course straight from BMW, and actually it works totally fine. BMW has a great control mechanism for different functions and features, so it works really well. And then moving on to dash panel here, you've got dual zone temperature control, plenty of buttons to control, so that's good. And again, this is all BMW design, so nice carbon fiber look here as well. And there is the center infotainment system in the middle. Now, this is also straight from BMW. It does have a wireless CarPlay, which is amazing. That's great. It's not a huge screen, but it's more than sufficient for what it is. And in the traditional and typical BMW format, you use your iDrive type button here to scroll and move around the screen. And you can do all kinds of stuff. Obviously, there's lots of things to change and to adjust and calibrate in here. So again, no change from last year here. There's lots of, some people complaining about the fact this is not as good as the newest BMW features. But to be honest, there isn't a huge difference, and for the most part, this works just fine. There's plenty of things you can adjust and change. So again, I won't go into full detail now because I'm doing a full review in a few days. But for now, in terms of overview, it's actually absolutely fine. This worked totally fine. Now it does have a JBL stereo system here, which is actually also more or less based on the BMW system. And I would say partly because it's a small enclosure, the stereo sound is pretty good, but I wouldn't give it A+. There's some depth, and the bass and so forth is a little bit missing in this Supra's stereo system. But that's really not something you would be too concerned about, because you don't buy the Supra for sound system, you're buying it for performance and for the exhaust sound system. So again, the interior hasn't changed. Look, if you look at the fit and finish, again, as an engineer, I can evaluate the fit and finish. The stitching looks good. Maybe it's not quite as straight as I've seen in the, let's say, a Lexus model, but I like the reasonably thin steering here, but very grippy here. And stitching carries all the way through here, good fit and finish. In owning my 2020 Supra for almost a year, again, I haven't had any problem in the interior of the car at all. Nothing, there's no rattles or squeaks. Some people do complain that when you put the stereo up a little bit too high, these speakers rattle a little bit, and I haven't experienced that, but that's a possibility. But other than that, the interior works really well. Again, everything is pretty well identical to 2020 model. Now I'll take you for a short drive and give you my first impression. I can already tell you based on my drive this morning that there isn't as much difference between the 2020 and the 2021 as you would think. The difference is actually very minor, even though the new 21 model has 47 more horsepower with other revisions made to not just the engine but the suspension pieces, the calibration of the actual shocks and steering, and so everything was recalibrated, refined to make the Supra a little bit more a better handling car. I can tell you, and as I move over through my car here, you'll know what I mean a little bit. But to be very honest, in terms of day-to-day drive, and for an average person buying this car, you're going to be hard-pressed to find an actual difference between the 2020 and the 2021. Now, when I do a full evaluation review, I will give you a lot more information about the difference, exactly what those differences are, and what the difference in the feel and experience is. For now, what I can tell you, first of all, is that the 47 more horsepower is slightly more noticeable in the sense that the power delivery is more progressive and linear, and when you step on the gas, it just seems like the car takes off in a little bit more progressive fashion. But other than that, it's not as noticeable as you would think. I can also tell you that when you move the steering a little bit, the steering effort is about the same as before. I can perhaps detect maybe a 5% more steering feel, but it's not necessarily that much sharper. The biggest difference is when you go faster at a higher speed, and when you're making more quick turns, you will notice the back end, what we call the rear end, coming along in a much smoother fashion with the 21. It doesn't hop and or lose the back end as easily as in 2020 model. But the overall steering feel, not a huge difference. A little bit tighter, like I said, maybe 5% tighter. The transmission and shift more or less the same. The suspension, I will say, is it's a little bit more refined. It's not quite as bumpy, and it's not quite as noisy. I don't believe they added any more insulation to this car, but I can tell you that they've added refinement to the whole suspension design and calibration, which makes the car not softer, but slightly more refined and smoother on the road. And I particularly noticed that when I go over bumpy road and so forth, it just seems overall a better feel all the way around. One thing I will say I've noticed right away is the noise or the sound of the exhaust, how it changed. So all the crackles, the pop, and what we call the fart sometime when you step on the gas and you let it go, that has changed actually more than you think. So notice that in this 2021 model, you just don't get the same crackle, pops, and what we call the farting from the exhaust. You don't get kind of the noisy sound that makes Supra actually quite unique. And the 2021 model, they've definitely tamed that part of the system. So exhaust, overall, it's about the same sound, but you don't get the crackles and the pops and what we call again the farting, which happens between the shift. That is actually not 100% gone, but I would say they've cut back by 50%. It's also noticeable when you start the engine, and in the 2020 model, right away there's a very large exhaust sound that starts off the car. but that's actually largely gone. So I believe that maybe something that people might have complained that it's a bit too loud actually, and too much like a third-party aftermarket exhaust sound, which I like obviously, but they have eliminated that for the most part. Now when you use your paddle shifter and you shift downward, you will get some of the crackles again, which might be hard to hear right now on this camera. But if I just try to downshift a little bit, yeah, even now you don't really hear it. So you have to accelerate a little bit and then downshift very quickly, and you'll notice that the crackles are still there. So it's not that it's gone complete, but it's way more refined and tame. And so this is something that you have to decide whether you want a quieter, a bit smoother and more refined Supra, or you want the more of the raw feel of the old 2020 model. At the end of the day, what is so amazing about the Supra is the level of performance, design, and features you get for this price. It would have been unthinkable several years ago that Toyota could introduce a car like this, even though it's in partnership with BMW, because the amount of performance, the level of features, and the overall handling and design at this price point is unthinkable. I just drove the new Porsche 911 a few weeks ago, the 992 we call it, and even though it's almost double the price, it's definitely not twice as good as a Supra. So again, at this price point, particularly the 3.0 version, it provides amazing value, and kind of weird to use the word value in a sports car, but if you're looking for a high performance car that you can actually use every day, this is it. I call Supra the everyday exotic. It's way cheaper than Porsche 911, substantially cheaper than Acura NSX, and actually comfortable enough and refined enough that you can drive it every day to and from work or wherever you want to go. I will say, just like old Supra though, regardless of what year it is hard to get in and out. This roof, it comes quite low, and something to keep in mind that you could bump your head as you go in and out, but after a while you do get used to it, and it's not so bad after all. But anyway, to finish off my conclusion, just a quick overview, full review coming up shortly. If you want an everyday exotic that's reasonably affordable, that provides tremendous performance at a reasonable price, this is the car you want to buy. So the question I always ask myself is, if I were to buy this car, which I did last year, and I keep it for 3 years, would I still be happy with it in 3 years, or would I want to get rid of it or buy something else? I can tell you right now, I've owned the 2020 Supra for a year, and I've been extraordinarily happy with it. It hasn't given me any problem. Every time I get into the car and drive it, it gives me a smile, because for the price, you get tremendous performance. And so what would I give this car overall report card in terms of A, B, and C? I give it solid A. Why not A+? Why not A-? Well, I give it a solid A because everything I expect from a sports car is there, and perhaps even more. Great fit and finish, amazing design, actually good resale value, and overall, so far, it's proven to be very reliable. But maybe not A+, because obviously it can't compete with some of the more expensive sports car like 911, which has many variations such as a GTS, all-wheel drive version, a convertible and cabriolet, and of course we're still missing the manual transmission. The transmission is amazing on this car, but we are still waiting to have the manual transmission option. So overall, solid A. I'll definitely continue to keep this car. The 2020 I have. Would I want to upgrade to 2021? I don't think so. I don't think the difference is so substantial on the everyday drive that it's worth losing money on the old one and getting the new one. So yeah, absolutely fantastic car to own and drive.